To order. We do not have a quorum for a finance committee meeting tonight, so we'll just talk about the legislation. We can take no action, which we, in theory, never really do. We don't really vote on things in finance. So anyway, we'll just plow through the agenda and answer any questions that any folks may have. So first item on the discussion list, not to be confused with an agenda, is the Resolution 9822 Star. This is amending the 9822. This is coming through water pollution. Mr. James, you want to talk about this?
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. As preliminary comment, I guess, when we finally got the bids in, they were a lot higher than the engineering estimate. And we've certainly taken a lot of look at what the impact might be on rates and things down the road. And I'd like to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium to give us a little more instruction on that, or a little more detail. And following that will be Ms. Denise Cruz, who's done a lot of good analysis on where this will take us. So, Stephen, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So, yeah, as has been conveyed via email, again, the bids did come in last week, and we have that $85.4 million about dollar number from Cocosing as the apparent low bidder. And again, obviously the initial legislation that was brought in asked for the $75 million and didn't turn out to be high enough with where bids came in at. So again, asking for the legislation to authorize a contract amount of $90 million, which would cover the 85.4 original, and then give us some wiggle room in there if any change orders did occur on the project. I know, so yeah, Denise can speak. I know, and Tom, we anticipated some questions about potential effects on rates, of course, with this being notably higher than what we've anticipated throughout the process. And Denise is here, as Tom said, that can speak more on that, and she's been on the ball on that and tracking things and looking at potential rate effects throughout the whole process, knowing that this would be a big one for us. So she can certainly speak to any questions you might have there. I don't know that I have anything else to add. I'm certainly open to any questions if anybody has any.
All right. Any questions for Stephen specifically to the change from 75 to 90? Yes, Mr. Matlin.
There was more than one bid, right?
Correct. There were two bids. Cocosing Industrial was, again, the apparent low bidder, and Bowen Engineering was the other contractor that bid out of Indianapolis, I believe. They came in at $95 million. So even $10 million higher than Cocosing. Yes.
Further questions for Mr. Wellstead before we pick on Ms. Cruz? Okay, well, very good. Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate it. Are you still looking for suspension tonight?
Yes, as noted, and I guess I did want to make a note here from what I saw on the agenda. So the OEPA is not requiring that we sign the contract by 8/15, but we have to have all bid information into them in order to stay on track for the loan award at the end of September. They require all of the bid documentation, so all of the bid tab and everything Cocosing submitted with the pricing. And that includes, as part of all that bid information, they do require the legislation, the approved legislation, to enter into a contract. So that is why I will be asking for suspension so that we can get that approved hopefully tonight, and then we can ship that off with everything else to them and again stay on track for that loan in September.
Very good. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
What I'm passing around, as Stephen said, is my analysis. So these are internal numbers. We've been working with these numbers ever since we started negotiating with this contractor and moving into this project. We have hired Red Oak, which is a subsidiary of Arcadis. They do our water and wastewater rate analysis. They have completed the wastewater side and are finishing up the water side. We have a meeting with the administration next week to go over those. And they obviously were waiting for the final bid numbers. They had seen these numbers escalating along with us through the spring and this bidding period. So this is just 2 pages. I'm going to start with the one with yellow, which is the debt service. There's several things working in our favor as we look at this debt service. There's some things we've had to change in the last week to make this affordable also. So first of all, the South Water Plant loans are paid off at the beginning of next year. So we have that debt service capacity because we will no longer be paying those OWDA, South Water Plant, and Clearwell loans. Clearwells we paid off in July. So that's about 1.7 million that we'll be saving.
You referenced.
We have black and white.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I'm
have black
sorry.
and-
It's the
Yeah,
second
so you
sheet.
might, yes, direct us to lines. Thank you.
Sorry.
Well, actually, I can see it's a little bit grayish. at the
Grayish,
top.
yes.
Okay.
The second thing that's working in our favor on this is one of the adjustments we had to make. We will be paying off the 2012 bonds and interest early. They were actually projected to go out to 2029, and to free up that debt capacity, we'll be taking some of the money that we freed up from OWDA and paying down those bonds early. We're paying 5% interest on those bonds, so that's a savings to us on top of building that debt service capacity. If you'll notice, the OWDA Miller Park plant loan, the loan is $97,000. That's the $85,000 that Stephen just told you for the contract, plus contingencies, plus engineering, plus the fee that we have to pay OWDA for the pleasure of borrowing money from them. So it's going to be about $97 million total on the loan.
How many years?
This, we stretched from a 20 to a 30.
Okay.
And we had no choice on that. That's a difference of about $1.5 million a year. Of course, we're going to be paying more interest going to a 30-year loan, but for the annual payment, we had to stretch that to 30. You'll see I've got this at a 3% interest rate. Hopefully, we can get this locked in quickly before the Fed make another interest rate, because the Upper Hocking loan that we got in February was 0.8%. So we've seen massive increases in the interest charge. We do not start making that loan payment until 2026. We are allowed to wait until 1 year after construction's complete before we make a loan payment. So that pushes that out and allows us to build that capacity. The other thing we had to change, we were initially planning on taking a loan for some large items down at the South Water Plant. We can no longer afford to do that. So we'll be squeezing our pennies on the water revenue, and of course the ARPA money that you so generously gave us. Thank you very much. The ARPA money will cover a lot of the projects down at the South Water Plant. So as you're looking at debt service, I do want to caution you that we have put all of our money eggs in the North Water Plant and the South Water Plant, and so don't come asking us to do other projects, because we don't have the money to do it unless you're willing to raise rates or kick in some money. So now if you go to the other page, the summary of cost page, you'll see our projections out to 2030. These are my best guess. These are the numbers we're still playing with Red Oak on because of inflationary costs. Obviously, Darren is seeing bigger inflationary costs on materials, on energy, on chemicals. So those items are higher inflation than the average inflation that we're seeing on projects. So we're still playing with those numbers. So if you go down to the surplus deficit, you'll see what we're projecting out there. 2022, obviously he's looking at a deficit. He has carryover money to cover that, so it's not like he's going into debt. But as always, he's watching his costs during the year, and he actually thinks he'll end up in the black this year. The lines below that are some things we're required to do. So under our bonds, we are required to carry a times coverage. That's the difference between our operation maintenance cost and our revenue. We're required to have 100% of all of our debt in time coverage. So we take our revenue, we subtract out the operation maintenance cost, and then we calculate how much is left. and that becomes that percentage. So as you can see, this year, we're going to be really close to the edge of that times coverage, that 100% times coverage, and then we move further out. Under our bond, we're also required to have 120% of our bond debt, and obviously our bond debt compared to our OWDA debt is very low, so we run very high percentages on our bond debt coverage. Once we pay off the bonds, that bond's time coverage goes away, and keeping 100% of our debt coverage as times coverage is just really a good financial practice that we should do, regardless of whether somebody's making us do that or not. Also, under our bond, we're required to have a mandatory carryover of 25% of our fixed costs. That's his carryover plus any surplus that he has during the year. So you can see what those numbers are for our mandatory carryover. Again, this is a good financial practice. We discussed this in our rate study. How many operating days do we want to carry over? And again, we're trying to preserve our bond rating the best that we can in case something would come up and we would have to sell bonds. And water's bond rating is on par with the cities, and we would like to see that better. Wastewater has a higher bond rating than the city. So as you can see, our internal projections are good. Not great, but good. We can serve our needs, and these are all without a rate increase. I'm not going to say that we're not going to propose a rate increase until we see the Red Oak study. And the rate increase would mainly be for operating costs and covering those inflationary issues.
All right, questions for yes, Mr. James?
As usual, both you and Stephen are extremely well prepared for all this information. And I noticed on the surplus deficit, surplus or deficit, in 2023 you have about $1.5 million, and then it starts jumping up pretty high, and I'm assuming that's when Google comes online.
This is due to the industrial customer. We are projecting that they will come in line in the middle of next year. So we've only projected half a year of income from them. So if they come on sooner, that's more income. As I was telling the mayor on the way in, the hotter it is, the more water they use. So global warming is good for us. Those 90-degree days in May are good. We'll be happy. So yes, those are some things that can impact us. Other things that can impact us, obviously, is if we can keep a handle on contingencies and we don't have a lot of changes. If we can squeeze nickels and dimes together and we don't have to pay interest on construction, which on Lawrence Street is running about $5,000 a month. So we have the option under the OWDA program that we can pay that interest during construction off before we finalize the loan, so we won't have to borrow that, which is what we're planning to do on Lawrence Street. So I'm really good at trying to squeeze nickels and dimes together, so we'll be looking at doing that.
So the only question I have is this stops at 2030 on the summary of costs, right? You don't have that out throughout the duration of the...
On my other spreadsheet, I do have out to 2041, I believe. The summary I only had to 2030, and the rate study will only go out 5 years, so
okay.
I didn't bother.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because you start getting to the diminishing surplus, and then the question is, when does that, and of course, again, that's looking into a crystal ball at this point in time.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay.
Yeah, my crystal ball is really foggy. If somebody's got a better one, I'd appreciate it, but the rate study will only go 5 years, so.
Sure. And this is contingent upon future phases of the industrial user?
Yes, the future phase is coming on. Obviously, the North Water Plant meets their phase 2 needs, and once we get past that, the water plant's there and the water's there. So yes, we've counted their revenue, but we don't have to do any more building to meet their phase 3.
Was there a phase 3 to the backside of that?
Three phases.
Yeah, so phase 1 is kind of 2023, phase 2 is year I'm looking for?
2020, mid-2024.
Okay, and then phase 3 potentially? I'm not, this is, again, it's a crystal ball.
18 months between phases is.
They were
Okay.
talking 18 months between phases. They're required to give us 30 months' notice for phase 2 and 6 months' notice for phase 3.
Okay,
So we have not received any notice yet, so.
yeah, so, yeah, once you build the plant, give us notice on phase 3, thank you very much, here's your water,
Yep.
right? Okay, other questions for Denise? Well, thank you for this, both Stephen and Denise, and I echo Mr. James's comments. We appreciate how buttoned up you are on this, and I appreciate the information. So, do you have anything else to close with?
We are going to ask for suspension, as you mentioned, and Ms. Teener will be our second on that.
Okay. Would you make sure that Mr. McDaniel and Mrs. Kreitz has a copy of this as
There
well?
should,
You have a PDF?
they're
of it?
over at Bob's.
There's extras right here.
Do you have a PDF of it?
I have a,
Well, if you give them to me, I'll make
Yeah.
sure they get them next
Okay.
meeting.
Okay.
So, thank
right.
you. All right, so
Thanks,
we're going to we're going to amend 9822, and, thank you. We'll amend 9822 to 9822 star, and then ask for suspension this evening. Very good, thank you. Next item is, is 9922, and this is a resolution to appropriate $130,000 that Judge Field talks about last week, about in the Indigent Driver Alcohol Treatment Fund, specific to the drug court that he spoke about. I'm going to need a volunteer for a second. Mrs. Teener. So this is and I think this seems like a redo of what happened to the other resolution we had.
Yeah, this is kind of part one. We got part two, kind of got the cart before the
Okay.
horse, so to speak. The indigent is where the 130,000 cash is residing. They just didn't have the budget to move it over to where they needed it to go through drug court. So
Okay.
now they're appropriating that cash so they can do a fund transfer and move it where it's needed.
And then we'll be all done.
And we'll be all done.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for suspension tonight, and Mrs. Teener has so graciously offered to be the second, so, very good. So we'll suspend on 9922 per our discussion with Judge Fields last week. Next item is Resolution 100-22. That's a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the South Broad Street paving project. This is coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Kurt, come up to discuss really this one and the
Yeah.
next piece.
Yeah, let's talk about 100 and 101 together,
Yeah.
because they go together.
Okay, good evening. So 100-22 is to go out to bid and enter a contract for our South Broad Street Southern Gateway project, which we've already built the sidewalks and did some of that work through a separate contract. Now we need to get in there and finish up the asphalt before winter. This is a bad time to bid a paving project, so we're in a big rush to get it out to bid. This has been before council when we applied for the Corpo money. Then I think again to authorize matching funds. And then we entered into an LPA agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation because Corpo funneled all its federal money, and they decided to funnel that money through the Ohio Department of Transportation. So this will be the fourth, and then following this will be the fifth. So this is to actually go out to bid and enter into a contract.
Any questions for Mr. Schonk? All right, and then the next piece is to appropriate the additional monies to cover the increased cost.
The extra 10.
Yeah, the next piece, we got bids on the High Street, which we just bid out, saw those prices, and we're gonna be low with our estimate. So I wanted to bump those numbers up. This isn't based on bid amounts, this is based on our expectations, the time of the year, asphalt prices. We do think this will cover it, and hopefully we won't need all of it. We did go to the Corpo folks who had set aside more money with inflation and anticipation of this, so they gave us the additional money to, it rounds up to $240,000 that we'll get from Corpo, and with $60,000 of our matching money.
Questions? All right, Mr. Schoonover, your pleasure.
We're gonna ask for suspension on both pieces, so we can get this out to bid and get it done this year.
Okay.
And then, so Mr. James is my second on the first piece, and then 10122 would be you.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you, Kurt. We appreciate it. All right, moving on. Next item we have is ordinance 2422. That is an ordinance to modify the non-union pay ordinance to make changes in the law director's office. I'll defer to Law Director Hall.
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. So we have been without a paralegal receptionist for the last 2 months now. Our paralegal receptionist left us to join the magistrate's office. She became his paralegal, unfortunately. And she was a fantastic paralegal, but what I learned on her exit interview was that she was not actually performing the duties of a paralegal because it just wasn't required in that position. And so she agreed it would be most appropriate if that was no longer a paralegal position. And so we're going to move it back to a receptionist / clerical assistant type position, because what this person is going to be responsible for, it no longer requires those skills and that experience and training as a paralegal.
Okay. Any questions for the Law Director? Yes, ma'am.
And I see there's 2 readings here. Does it need to be 2 readings? So.
No, that's fine if it's 2 readings. So we've advertised for it and we're in the process of
okay, 'cause I
interviewing
thought
right now.
one,
So it's 2
Is that
readings.
okay?
It's
All right.
perfectly fine. Yep, thank you though.
Trying to clear the deck for you. Very good. All right, seeing no further discussion, we will, 2 readings. Mrs. Kreitz will be the second on that one. Are there any departmental updates this evening? Mr. Martin.
So, next council, I've been sending out, I would like to bring a resolution for fuel cost increase and just make it one resolution. And we're getting that data right now in from the departments that believe that they're gonna need fuel line item increase. Many of those will be the enterprise funds, taken from their unencumbered funds that they have in their account. There is some general fund monies that we're looking at. It also is gonna include some funds to be able to purchase a new fuel for our fuel station. We did this years ago. We kind of brought a all-inclusive resolution in to cover multiple departments at the same time. And so I've tasked them out there. Most of them I've gotten back right now. A few departments I was surprised. I think they can cover it. But just to let you know, and we'll introduce the next council, and just wanted to let you know it's coming forward. So it's not numbers I want to see, but, you know, it is what it is. You know, we have a little dip in the funds. I don't have confidence it's going to stay low, but I've told our department heads to calculate on certain things that I've asked them to look at and see if they could go through, so.
Well, no, and I appreciate you doing it all in one piece. I mean, you might as well just do it one big piece, clean it all up. Whatever doesn't get spent falls into carryovers, you know,
Yes.
and we don't have to worry about it and, you know, looking at pennies in November, December. So that's fine. Whenever you bring it forward, we'll get it pushed through. Thank you, sir. Any other departmental updates? Yes.
Just want to let you know that today I converted our financial and payroll software to the cloud. So tomorrow will be, I've just sent out the link for the departments to switch to, so there no longer will be off a in-house server, so which will help facilitate department heads, what have you, that they can then react quicker and be able to get into the system, facilitate payments from anywhere that they have internet access. So
Wow.
they won't be tied to a desktop unless they want to be.
Well done. Yeah, someone's back there clapping. So that's very good news. Awesome. All right, other departmental updates. All right, updates going once, twice gone. We will now defer to President Uhl for tonight's meeting prep.
I think we're prepped.
He's prepped. Any other items for finance? Since it's just a meeting, there's no reason. So we are done.
We're done. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:30. Dagger Law has been part of the Lancaster community for more than 110 years. This is where we live and work. You'll see us at festivals, sporting events, and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. We are experienced. Dagger Law.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day and your many blessings. We pray that you would continue to guide and direct us. Lord, may you prepare our hearts tonight to go about the work that we have been called to do, that we have been elected to do by the people of Lancaster. We ask for your continued blessings. Guide us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz? Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel? Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Ms. Sitterly?
Here.
Mr. Stoughton?
Here.
And Mrs. Teener.
Here.
Let the record reflect that 7 of 9 members of City Council are in attendance this evening. Mr. Stoughton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. McDaniel from tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. McDaniel from the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated July 18th, 2022.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are the reports of city officials?
There are a series of emails regarding Judge Fields submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. Email dated July 25th, 2022 regarding Planning Commission minutes for July 24th, 2022 submitted by Mr. Stoughton. Email dated July 28th, 2022 regarding temporary resolution 98-22 submitted by Stephen Wellstead, Stormwater Manager. Email dated July 28th, 2022 regarding Elton O submitted by Mayor Scheffler. Email dated August 3rd, 2022 regarding Monday submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated August 4th, 2022 regarding City Hall personnel update submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated August 5th, 2022 regarding code enforcement agenda submitted by Mr. Ehlers. And finally, an email dated August 8th, 2022 regarding Finance Committee agenda submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There is one, a certified letter dated July 25th, 2022 regarding Hunter Trace LLC submitted by Joseph Wickham, Director of Development, Fairfield Homes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We do have a special presentation tonight. Holly Matty is with us. She is our consultant for our revision and overhaul of our Lancaster City codes, and so she asked for a few minutes to introduce herself to City Council and talk a little bit about where the project is. So, Ms. Matty, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I will not take a lot of your time. I'm going to do a 5-minute update, and I'm going to pass these brochures around along with my card. If you've been to one of my little updates to one of my other boards and you have this information, you can just keep passing it around. Otherwise, please take a copy. My name is Holly Matty. I'm with Crossroads Community Planning. As President Wool mentioned, I am the consultant that's helping with the zoning code rewrite project. I know some of you from my previous days when I was the director of the Fairfield County Regional Planning Commission. I worked there for 16 years. I was director for 9 of those years. Since gone on and done a little bit economic development work, and then started my own business in 2020, and have been writing zoning codes and doing land use plans for various communities across the state of Ohio. I've done work in communities, a lot of communities in Central Ohio, but I'm also in Hamilton County and Cincinnati area, and I've also done some zoning code work up in the Toledo area, all in the little 2.5 years of my business. I'm excited to be here with you. This will be a 14-month process. The process is outlined on the front as well as a timeline that's on the back. Right now, we are in the stakeholder engagement exploration stage. We take about 3 months to really dive into the zoning code that you have, understand the issues that you've had. I know a lot of people have some, concerns with that, and that we're going to be doing a major overhaul here. But also hearing from not only boards and council of the city, but as well as business stakeholders. So I've had interviews with some business owners that Travis Markwood has been able to organize for me. And then also just working with staff themselves to understand the day-to-day struggles that they have with the code. We'll also do some public outreach as well in September. We're still defining exactly what that will look like and when that'll take place, but I am working with the staff on getting that in place. Once we put all that together, I will put together a code diagnostic report. It will say what I heard from the stakeholders that I interviewed and the boards and the council, as well as what, for my professional opinion, the issues that I'm seeing with the existing code. And then I'll also have a code framework that we've put together, that I'll put together, showing the new districts versus the old districts, and kind of the framework of what that would look like before we actually start writing the regulations. We'll present that to our stakeholder committee that we've put together. I've worked with the mayor to identify the parties that sit on that stakeholder committee. There are representation, there's a council representation, planning commission, board of zoning appeals, some business owners, chamber, et cetera, that sit on that stakeholder committee. We'll present that report to that committee. We'll say that, okay, yes, we agree with this framework. Once we get the framework in place, then we start the actual writing of the legislation, of the code itself. We'll go through about 4 drafts of that, and then back and forth with the stakeholder committee. And periodically, I'll be coming into both the planning commission and the council to give you updates of where we are with the project through that 4 draft process, and get feedback from you as well during that. Once we get to a final draft, as far as the stakeholders committee is comfortable with this, then we'll do another public outreach and all of those different steps. It takes about a year to get through what we're doing right now, plus the 4 drafts, and then it takes about another 2 or so months to get through the adoption process. That's why we're looking at a 14-month process, and it's something I've been consistent with other communities that I've been working with. So at this point, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Very good, thank you. Sounds simple to me. So, do anyone have questions they'd like to ask Miss Maddie while she's here? As she suggested, I think over the course of the next, 14 or 15 months, we'll see her back several times to bring things forward to us or update us on process. So, no? Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's well past time, and so we're excited to be able to move forward and get to a finished product. So,
thank you. I appreciate it.
thank you very much. All right. Okay, are there any petitions or memorials this evening?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, Lancaster City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address us on any item or issue they would like. Let me just state that while this time is for voters and taxpayers of the city, this is not the public hearing. So if you're here to speak for or against the proposed legislation for the public hearing, please save your comments until that time. This is, again, for voters and taxpayers to address us on any other item or issue they would like. The clipboard that you need to sign in on for, sir, if you're here for voter and taxpayer time, is the green one. So please take the green one and write your name and address on there. And as he does that, I'll complete the rest of the spiel, which is each person who wants to address council should do that. And then state your name and address for the record as well as you begin your comments. You will have 5 minutes per the rules of council to address city council tonight. And please note that perhaps during a different time at the meeting, we may choose to address your concerns. At this particular time, we will not. With that, sir, please go ahead and state your name and address and begin your comments.
Todd Nolan, 321 East Allen Street. I'm here tonight to inquire about something, not just for myself, but probably for all the citizens of Lancaster. Who takes it upon themselves to let someone with 3 or 4 outstanding warrants walk after being questioned by the Lancaster Police Department? Now, I don't blame the patrol officers. They have to do what they're told. So that told me it's higher up the ladder. Is it one person or is it a group effort? Was he giving jail cards out because the festival was going on? And I know the jail wasn't closed that day. This is wrong. This isn't what the taxpayers are paying for. As if officers don't have a tough enough job in these crazy times, they shouldn't have to say there's nothing we can do. Everyone above on that ladder should have their backs, not undermine them. But after hearing this, I wonder, and so should the rest of the citizens of this city. It's time to stop coddling prisoners, criminals, and start enforcing all the laws that you're getting paid to do. There's an old TV show that was on that said, don't do the crime if you ain't got the time. Evidently, someone on the other side doesn't have the time or don't want to do their job. So here's my 2 cents worth on the subject. If you're appointed making these decisions, maybe you should quit or be fired. 2, if you're elected in making these decisions, maybe you should be recalled or don't put your name back on the ballot. And 3, if you have a law degree in making these decisions, maybe you should be reported to the Ohio Bar Association and barred for dereliction of duty. Mr. Stoughton at the last meeting said something about getting a new police station. Well, to start paying for it, maybe he could talk to somebody to take the cuffs off our own police officers and have them start writing tickets in this town. You never see anybody getting pulled over. Speeders, red lights. And I believe there's a state law about window tinting. That'd be a good start for it. But as for this voter, I'm a law and order 100%. But after hearing this crap, I would vote no for your new police station. So whoever's making decisions, please stand up and explain to me and the citizens of this city why. And don't put your answer on Facebook. I'm not allowed on there. Lady of the house, she's afraid I'll offend somebody.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Yes, you signed in, right, sir? You signed in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, is there anyone else who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? All right, well, thank you for being here tonight. We will move on then to reports of standing committees.
There are 3. The IT Telecom meeting minutes dated May 20th, 2022, and July 15th, 2022, submitted by Mrs. Teener. Finance Committee meeting minutes dated July 18th, 2022, and August 8th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Stoughton. And finally, the Code Enforcement and Zoning meeting minutes dated August 8th, 2022, submitted by Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are the reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
Tonight, we do have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 23-22. In just a moment, I'll ask that the clerk read the preamble to temporary ordinance 23-22, and then I'll turn it over to the sponsor, who is Mr. Ehlers, and he will have opportunity to bring opening comments. After opening comments, we will open up the floor to both proponents and opponents, and this is where things begin to differ from the voter and taxpayer time that we just had. During this time, if you are a proponent, or in other words, for the legislation, we ask you to come forward and speak at that time. After all of the proponents have had opportunity to speak, we will then open the floor to opponents, those who are in opposition to this legislation. Once that is finished, we will go back to proponents for rebuttal and allow them to address council once again, should they choose to do so. Finally, we will end with a second round of opponents. It's very important to understand that if you wish to speak in the second round of rebuttal, you must have spoken in the first round of proponent or opponent testimony. In addition to that, again, in differing from voter and taxpayer time, city council members may have questions and they may choose to ask those questions while you are at the podium. So please be prepared to answer those questions if they come your way. With that, and after that, then we'll close the public hearing and then finalize that process. With that, we'll ask that the clerk please read the preamble of the legislation.
An ordinance to amend the City of Lancaster zoning map to change the zoning of 4.083 plus minus acres identified as Fairfield County Auditor Tax Parcel Number 053-502-7600 from industrial heavy to commercial general and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yeah, so we're asking that this plot of land be rezoned from industrial heavy to commercial general to facilitate a Dollar General to be built there. There's certain stipulations with it that there's going to be sidewalks built to certain depths along the way. Kurt, do you have anything that you would like to add to it to enlighten us?
Okay, so some of the staff recommendations or the conditions of the rezoning that I remember was dedicating additional right-of-way. I believe that Canal Street has adequate right-of-way. It meets the thoroughfare plan of the city. Broad Street, they needed to give 5 or 10 more feet. We also asked that they connected the bike trail to and along Broad Street, and also to put sidewalks along Canal and Broad Street. If you drive down there, there's kind of a hole. It used to be in the floodplain. They revised the maps, now it's not. We asked that all be filled in and the building sit at an appropriate elevation above the base flood elevation. I think those were the extent of those conditions. And we wanted to do that now while they're doing the rezoning, because depending on what happens to there's no guarantee that it'll be subdivided or there'll be any other opportunity to ask for those things. So those were the staff recommendations.
Thank you. That finishes my comments.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Mr. Ehlers. With that, we will open up the floor to proponent testimony. If you are here in favor of this legislation, please come forward. You will sign in on the silver clipboard. Sir, if you're coming, you can begin your comments, and then you can sign in afterward as the next person prepares. So just state your name and address for the record, and then feel free to begin.
Yeah, Jeff Mattingly with Carter Commercial Real Estate in Columbus, Ohio, address 7650 Rivers Edge Drive in Columbus.
Thank you.
Our engineer is not here yet. He had some exhibits, but I can start. You're familiar with the property, about a 2-acre piece of property, buying from Mr. Singer for the purpose, you said, for a Dollar General. In the past, we would have built a 9,100 square foot building. It's about 2 years ago. We stopped doing that now and are building a 10,640 square foot building to accommodate more fruits and vegetables. Dollar General's come out with a concept called the Fresh Initiative. They heard that their stores didn't have enough health food, and they've addressed this by adding 1,500 square feet, mainly for coolers and freezers, add fruits and vegetables. Guess what people had said in the past they wanted. As far as the building itself is concerned, here's what we're not going to do. If you all went to the rural areas out in the middle of nowhere and you see that 4-sided yellow metal siding building, we're not going to build that in your city. This is close to downtown, so we're not going that direction. We're going to put hardy plank on the front and side. I think going to the north and to the west, and we're putting some fall blinds, shutters on there. Again, I wish he was here with his. I do have it on here, but some fall blinds on the building. I can pass this around if you'd like to, but you see the hardy plank on the front, not yellow siding building. Again, because it's closer to your downtown. It's not appropriate to put that in a downtown area. Maybe in a country mobile cornfield, it's a little bit different, but this is your downtown area. So we're cognizant of that, and spending a lot more money on the facade to build a better project than we would, again, out in the middle of nowhere. This is also the first project I've done, probably 80 of these for the developers call it a Capital Growth Buckholder out of Alabama. They've done about 1,100 over 18 state territory. We are one of 5 preferred developers left, 4 preferred developers left in the state of Ohio that are allowed to build Dollar Generals. This is not a mom and pop organization. It's a well-oiled machine. They do about 70 a year. I've done 80, and the 80 I've done here in Ohio, this is the first time we have agreed, and happily so, to improve someone else's property. Mr. Singer owns a property to the north of us, and even though we're not developing that, we're going to put in a bike path per request of planning Commission, we're gonna put a bike path along Broad Street and a sidewalk so it's more accessible for citizens to get to the property. I think that upgraded building shows our commitment to develop a quality project in your city, and hopefully you guys agree and approve our rezone request.
Very good, thank you, sir. Does anyone have any questions?
You say silver board?
Yes, please.
Just a comment.
Yes, go
I
ahead, Mr.
appreciate
Jones.
seeing the picture.
And I'm sorry about that, we're still have a big easel here, but I think it started at 7.
Yeah, no, that's okay, that gets it done. We can see what you're looking at there.
Is your engineer in big trouble, or?
Yeah. He thinks he's getting paid for coming down from Akron. No.
All right, other questions or comments before we move to the next proponent? All right, thank you very much, sir. I see Mr. Singer there.
Hello, I'm Dan Singer. My holding company owns the property and have been trying to decide what we could do to help enhance that part of the community. And so when the conversation began, we started talking about it. We've worked on this for about a year, trying to figure out what would be best for that area. And so we came up with these thoughts. And then we, when we went to the Board of Zoning Appeals and to the Planning Commission, the idea came up that we should possibly do some sidewalks and things that would help connect the bike path and do Canal Street. And so the developers have agreed that we would enhance Broad Street, would give up more of the right-of-way along there. And Canal Street, we would take that whole line of hedge out and run the sidewalk all the way down to Columbus Street, which is a fairly significant sidewalk. We'd have some sidewalk cuts or curb cuts for the accesses that are there and the buildings that are there. And any extra dirt that would be left when the building was being built, we would push that into the hole. We have been working on a plan to get that whole thing leveled out, and we're trying to decide in that plan how to develop those other two pieces of property that will be left. The building is going to be placed along on the river side, not on the Canal Street side of that land, okay? So it'll be the southernmost corner of that property, as you saw on the drawings. And that's really about all I have to say at this point. I'm wide open for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. Any questions or comments for Dan? Yes, Mayor.
We probably should mention that Planning Commission and BZA have both approved the applications and recommend the rezoning.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Singer. Is there any other proponents? Ms. Everett.
Good evening. I'm going to have to scrap. I wasn't sure I was going to be a proponent, but I love hearing that the city has already established and that the property owner is so invested that they're establishing these fantastic design standards, because it is the southern gateway into the downtown. So it's really, really encouraging to hear that you recognize that and that the additional investment is going to be made because, as Winston Churchill said, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And as a Main Street director, I mean, Mr. Uhl, you know very well that Dollar Generals seem to always be in trashy places, and trashy places attract trashy people. But what I've noticed recently is that when I've seen some Dollar Generals in other communities, they look beautiful. They've had brick facades, they've had gooseneck lighting, and all I thought was, you know, Dollar General's not seeking out trashy places. They're seeking out anywhere that they can be, but they're going to adhere to whatever the standards that that community has. And so it's really encouraging that our property owner, our city officials
the contractor, the developer, recognize that we as a city have these higher design standards and that we can demand and ask for more. The walkability, the access to fresh foods, which is, I mean, that south side is a wholly walkable community. The addition of sidewalks and a connector to the bike trail, this is a part of our greater vision for our downtown, and an extraordinary, I can't believe I'm saying this about a Dollar General, but this will actually be benefiting our community. So again, completely changing up 2 pages worth of things that I had to say, but I do think that it is important that we do send the message that if you're going to invest in Lancaster and if you're going to be placing something like this here, we can elevate our design standards, because we want to attract the kind of people and the kind of places that are going to want to be next to these things. Dan's got other properties there that I have big plans to put other things down there, and if it's one of those box stores with the giant yellow lights behind it, that's not going to help me spur economic development. And development for the sake of development doesn't do us or our children or our grandchildren any good in the future, as far as the old school type of Dollar General developments. So we know Dollar General developers can engage in quality design that feels respectful to our community. And I'm glad to hear that we respect ourselves enough that we're saying, hey, we would like this higher level design on Dollar General if it's going to be in the southern gateway into the downtown.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. Anyone have questions or comments? I'll only mention that you fibbed to me because you said you had a short statement and then you referred to a 2-page statement. And so
I didn't know how I was going to feel.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Well, thank you for being here. All right. Any other proponents, those in favor of this legislation? If not, we will move to opponent testimony. Is there anyone who opposes this legislation and change? Seeing no one approaching the podium, we'll move back to proponents. Is there any proponent who previously spoke who would like to say a final word?
Unless you guys have any questions, we're good.
Any final questions? Well, thank you for being here, sir. Thank you, Mr. Singer. Thank you, Ms. Everett, all three for being here to speak tonight. Since we had no opponent speak initially, there's no opportunity for opponent rebuttal. I will turn it back over to the sponsor for closing comments.
I don't think I have anything more to add than what was already said.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will consider this public hearing closed. Moving forward on the agenda, we'll move to the reading of resolutions, then beginning with the second reading of temporary resolution 94-22.
A resolution to amend the certificate of appropriation with the county auditor and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund 1001, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the second of 3 readings, please.
Second of 3 readings on temporary resolution 94-22, temporary resolution 98-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for the construction of the North Water Treatment Plant Replacement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President. At this time, I would like to make a motion that we replace temporary resolution 9822 with 9822 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary resolution 98-22 and replace it with temporary resolution 98-22 star. Discussion on the motion to replace. Mr. James.
Just briefly, according to Ms. Denise Cruz and Stephen Wellstead, who gave us a lot of good information on the change from the $75 million that we previously asked for to $90 million, I think it is appropriate that we go forward with this.
Thank you, Mr. James. Further discussion on the motion to amend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to amend carries 7-0. We now have before us temporary resolution 98-22 star. Mr. James.
Thank you, President. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution numbered 9822 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 98-22 star. Mr. James.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 7-0. Mr. James.
Thank you again, President Ohl. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon our written record temporary resolution numbered 9822 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 98-22 star. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 98-22 star passes 7-0. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 99-22.
A resolution to amend the certificate of appropriation with the county auditor and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the indigent driver alcohol treatment fund 2032, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary 9922, please.
Second.
Motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 99-22. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. We heard from Judge Fields last week, last meeting, rather, 3 weeks ago, about wanting to have this money in place to continue the great work of his drug court. Therefore, I'm going to ask for suspension tonight to get this appropriated.
Thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Further comments on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 7-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 9922, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 99-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Nothing further, sir.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 99-22 passes 7-0. Temporary resolution 100-22.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the South Broad Street paving project and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 122.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 100-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
We're asking for suspension. This is the next phase of the South Broad Gateway project. Sidewalks are done, paving's up next, and asking for suspension so we can get it out to bid and done, hopefully before the end of the year.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 7-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 122.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 100-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
No, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 100-22 passes 7-0. Temporary resolution 101-22.
A resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 1001 and LDOT improvement fund 3014, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 101-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of temporary resolution 101-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
This is a companion piece to temporary resolution 100, just appropriating some additional funds. The engineer feels it's going to be a little more expensive than their original thought, so they want to have some extra wiggle room for bids and being able to enter into a contract, so that's why we're asking for suspension.
Very good. Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 7-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 101-22.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 101-22. Further discussion, Mr. Schoonover?
No thanks.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly? Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 101-22 passes 7-0. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the second reading of temporary ordinance 21-22.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 3, Traffic Code, Title 7, Parking, Chapter 351, Parking Generally, Section 351.15, Parking during snow removal or street cleaning, and Part 3, Traffic Code, Title 1, Administration, Chapter 303, Enforcement, Impounding and Penalty, Section 303.08, Impounding of Vehicles, Redemption of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 21-22.
Second.
Motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 21-22. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
I'll wait, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly? Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 7-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 21-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 21-22. Mr. Schoonover.
Yet Mrs. Kreitz, last meeting when this was introduced, explained it, and it's just a change in some wording to help us with the removal of illegally parked cars during paving projects. So it's just a little touch to make it more efficient for us to get those things handled.
Yeah, we're just going to take the equipment and give them a little touch out of the way, right?
Yeah, a little.
That's a joke,
push.
people. We're not doing that. That's not what it says.
Right? I mean, that's, yeah, right?
So we currently have that right under snow removal and street cleaning, but we're adding in this ordinance, both these sections 303 and 351, I believe, right? To add paving and construction. We had an incident this summer on 6th Avenue. Signs were clearly posted days before like we did. And so we're doing milling of the street, and there's a lot of cost there to bring that miller back. And so I think it would help us as we try to softly deal with this issue in a creative way. We're asking you to pass that.
Yeah. So ultimately, if we want our streets repaved, which we all do, and there's a sign posted, we're just hoping that you follow that sign, and if you don't, we'll move swifter than normal to help
Shove
you
you out
out.
of the way.
Yeah, like, we gotta get stuff done, is that right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, if I may, also, this makes it so the police do not have to impound a vehicle. Before, the
Yes.
police, in order to remove that vehicle, had to impound it. Here, we're saying they may impound, and so that's going to save citizens fees, obviously, because the plan for LDOT is that they will call a tow company and ask them to move that parked vehicle to the next available public parking spot. So that removes the police officer from having to come out and, go through the whole process. And also, the citizen's vehicle will still be there. It will just be up the street or around the corner. They're going to log the location with LPD and dispatch so that if somebody thinks their vehicle was stolen, obviously we can make sure that their vehicle is still there. But it costs us between $50 and $100 just to tow the vehicle to the next available public parking spot that's not in the construction zone. And that's the plan. We only have to do this 3 or 4 times, usually over the summer. But it is, a problem because we're holding up construction, trying to locate a vehicle owner for approximately an hour before we go ahead and impound the vehicle.
So we're gonna save some impounding fees for folks, but give you a little bit of a heart attack on
Maybe.
where your car may
don't
be
think we should
parked.
tell
That's why I
them.
wanted
think we
to-
should just
Like,
let 'em
yeah,
know.
just let them figure it
That's
out.
why
You
I
didn't
wanted
follow
to
the
say what the
sign.
process
follow
was.
the
That's why I
rules,
wanted to
so-
get that out there on
So the
record.
next closest street, not like across town and
No.
go find your car.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's like Perry County. You're just gonna go and get sent.
This will feel like my 20s all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where's
where'd I
where's
park my car? Isn't there a movie about that?
Yes, there is.
Something like that.
And they
Dude,
show
where's
up
my
with
car?
tattoos. Yeah, dude, where's my car? But that's probably what you should get for not following the rules of the sign, is, most people's
So
opinion, so.
do the people though have to pay at least the tow truck driver for coming out and moving that? Oh,
No, we're not asking the citizens to pay anything, because really, this saves the police department time and money. It saves LDOT time and money. And so LDOT is willing to eat that expense. Superintendent Hentz was very kind and volunteered to take that expense on to make everybody's lives easier.
It's not only that, it actually will save us money, because this milling machine went all the way down, it was working completely down. We spent a lot of effort knocking on doors. We think that the person was not only sleeping, but had sound counseling. We were not able to get that person out there for hours, and there's night shift and working, or sometimes they could be on vacation and they just didn't see the signs. So it truly saves us money to be able to go this direction, as we have been successful. And it truly is maybe 3 or 4 times a year. It's not a big problem. Most people very much comply.
That's my question. How frequently does it happen?
Yeah, so we're hearing 3 or 4 times, and we're not expecting a mad rash of people not following the signs when they're posted.
No.
Okay.
No. It's just enough to be annoying.
Sure.
For, everybody involved, but it's not that common.
Okay. Further questions or comments? All right, we are on the motion to pass, right? I've lost track here.
Correct.
Yes, all right, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly? Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
yes.
Temporary ordinance 21-22 passes 7-0. Temporary ordinance 23-22.
An ordinance to amend the City of Lancaster zoning map to change the zoning of 4.083 plus minus acres identified as Fairfield County Auditor Tax Parcel Number 053-502-7600 from industrial heavy to commercial general, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Ehlers and seconded by Ms. Sitterly.
Mr. Ehlers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 23-22.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 23-22. Discussion, Mr. Ehlers.
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend.
I don't know if the engineer would like to say something since he drove all the way down here.
Oh, is he here now? Ah, I think they're good.
It would be worthy to embarrass him.
I think he's got enough problems back here, yeah, so it's okay. All right, if there are no other comments, please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 7-0. Mr. Ehlers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 23-22.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 23-22. Discussion, Mr. Ehlers.
None at this time.
This is the only time, so
Yeah.
you're good to go? Okay, any other discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 23-22 passes 7-0. We now have first reading on temporary ordinance 24-22.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance let's start again. An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 12-22, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 12-22 for the non-union pay ordinance and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the first of 2 readings, please.
First of 2 readings on temporary ordinance 24-22. Are there any further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we have no tabled legislation. Is there any unfinished business tonight? Is there any new business tonight? We'll ask that the clerk please read our announcement of scheduled meetings.
The next meeting of Lancaster City Council is August 22nd. The meeting following is September 12th. Both meetings here at 6:30 p.m. in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Water Pollution, August 10th at 8:30 at the 1897 Conference Room. Public Works, August 12th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. Economic Development, August 18th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. IT Telecom, August 19th at 8 a.m. at the 1897 Conference Room. And finally, Finance, August 22nd at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There is one bill to PNC for publication of legislation in the MNCO in the amount of $138.85.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bill.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I know of no need for an executive session, therefore a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Please remember to sign your legislation. Have a great night.